chapter 15, beginning at verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So, as we begin to think about these parables, I just want to, I've got some pictures to show you on the screen, so hopefully you'll be able to see them. We may need to dim the lights a little bit as well in a minute. But perhaps before I do that, in fact, I'll just give you a little bit of update on some of my own news. So some of you know that I work as a chaplaincy manager in the Manchester University hospitals. Well, I've just recently got a new job. It's head of chaplaincy, so a bit of a promotion, and it's at Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust, which is based in Prestwich, just down the road, and a 5-minute drive from my house, so I'm quite pleased about that. But I won't be starting till about October, because I've got to give a lot of notice. So do please remember me in your prayers for that. Also, my partner's mother is quite poorly at the moment. She's got lung cancer, and it's spread to most of the rest of her body. So she probably hasn't got very long left, but we're not sure because we haven't been given. It's my partner's mum. So her name's Chris. No, that's fine, dear. So yeah, she's quite poorly. So I'll be going down relatively soon after the service to see her, to take her communion and have that. It's quite a strange dynamic, because I do this in the hospital all the time, talking to patients who are very poorly and saying, have you got your affairs in order, not just kind of legal affairs, but your spiritual affairs with God. And it's quite a strange dynamic when you're doing that with your partner's mum. It feels a bit different, but very important. So I shall be doing that too. And then, of course, we're getting married as well in September, so in 2 months' time. Steve and I will be getting married at Luther King House Chapel. So that's the Baptist College in Manchester. We're going to get married there, hopefully. Again, there's a few legal things that need to be sorted out just to smooth the way for that. But yeah, so I thought I'd throw in a few life events over the next few months to help my sanity and to hopefully deepen my trust in God, because there'll be times when I'll need just His strength to get through. But anyway, let me tell you a story. This is about, can we see the PowerPoint at all? Is it there? Yeah, there we go. So I'll tell you a story about a Baptist minister. This Baptist minister had a Siamese cat. So apologies if you don't like cats, but this Baptist minister loved cats, and Siamese in particular. In fact, he had more than one cat, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So this Baptist minister had always wanted a cat of his own. He'd grown up in a house where there were always 2 cats, and the 2 cats were always Siamese cats. But it was not until he was 48 that the opportunity arose to buy a Siamese cat of his very own. He had to travel all the way to Preston to view some Siamese kittens, and he chose this one for his very own. He brought the kitten home and named it Veronica, which reminded him of the first secretary that he had as a Baptist minister, who was also called Veronica. She wasn't a cat, though. So Veronica grew up into this lovely cat, and it was not long before she wanted kittens of her own. Well, the Baptist minister remembered when he was young that our cats always used to have kittens, and how lovely it was. So a suitable partner was identified for Veronica, and she spent a weekend in Bradford with him. Well, the kittens were born 9 weeks later. But to the minister's surprise, I'm sure you can see the problem. They're not Siamese cats. They were all black. So clearly poor Veronica had been assaulted by a neighbourhood cat before she'd managed to get to Bradford. Nevertheless, homes were found for each of the 5 kittens, although the minister kept one for himself. Well, it wasn't long before Veronica wanted more kittens. And this time, she had a successful litter of 7 Siamese kittens. Well, homes were found for 5 of the kittens, but for various reasons, the minister kept 2. So he now had 4 cats, 3 Siamese and 1 half Siamese cat. He loved them all, but Veronica remained his favourite. She was the most affectionate, and while the other 3 played together, she would often sit on his lap in the evening. Now, some people keep Siamese cats indoors, but the minister remembered when he grew up that the Siamese cats were free to go inside and outside as they wanted. And so a cat flap was installed in the back door so that they could come and go as they wished. And the 3 Siamese cats ruled the neighbourhood from their secure base. But then one day, Veronica didn't come home. She didn't come home the next day either, or the day after that. And he was heartbroken. He walked around the neighbourhood and delivered leaflets and put up posters, a bit like this. Quite soon his phone began to ring several times a day from people saying they thought they'd seen Veronica. But could you see the problem? We had 2 other Siamese cats, and the sightings were of the other Siamese cats. And then we also discovered that there were 2 other Siamese cats that lived a street or 2 away. And so all the phone calls were about the wrong cat. And the Baptist minister had to say, well, what colour collar is the cat wearing? And then knew that it wasn't the right cat. Just going to leave the story there for a moment and come back to the Gospel of Luke, where we read this story of the Pharisees and the scribes criticizing Jesus for what? For welcoming sinners. This man, they say, welcomes sinners and eats with them. Well, we would probably say, well, that's exactly what Jesus should be doing, showing the inclusive and compassionate nature of God, showing us that no one is beyond the reach of God's love. But Jesus' actions of spending time with sinners was challenging the societal norms of the time, challenging the prejudices. See, a self-respecting rabbi wouldn't spend lots of time with sinners. The self-respecting rabbi would spend time with perhaps a group of disciples, as Jesus did, and also teaching in the synagogue and spending time with religious people. But Jesus wasn't doing that. He was going to the houses of people who were known sinners and eating with them. He was going to the parties where the sinners were. And the religious authorities did not like that. So Jesus went on to respond to this challenge by telling 3 stories, 3 parables. And so firstly, he tells about the shepherd who leaves for 99 sheep to go and find the one lost sheep. and puts it round his shoulders and carries it home. And then he tells about the woman who lost her coin, probably from a headdress, which would have had 10 coins, and then one went missing. And she swept the house from top to bottom to find the lost coin, and when she found it, she said to her friends, "Come and rejoice with me, for I have found the lost coin." And then the third parable, the one that we didn't read, but I imagine is quite familiar to you, the parable of the so-called lost son. But I think we see at the end of that story when the elder son is saying, "Why are you throwing a party for this son that was wasteful and spent all his inheritance, and you've never done anything like that for me?" And so the father here is coming out to find his lost son, the elder son, who is lost from the celebration when the younger one returns home. So the shepherd, the woman, and the father all tell us something of the Father's heart of love, of his compassion for those who are lost, and of the way that he will rush out and reach out to find those who need him. And so Jesus calls us to do the same, to extend grace and compassion to all, just as Jesus did. And so we need to think ourselves, well, how is it that we can be more welcoming and accepting, especially of those who are different to us? And I know here at Hayward Baptist, you're all very good at this, but we still need to continue to ask ourselves the question, how do we show God's love to those who feel marginalized or rejected? How do we follow Jesus' example and being a living testimony of God's boundless love and mercy? You might remember at President Trump's inauguration, there was the service afterwards where the preacher challenged President Trump to show mercy to those who feel scared right now. And in the United States, there are plenty of groups that feel scared of President Trump, but one group that I think I feel a particular connection to, because my youngest child falls within that group, is those who are non-binary or trans, who feel quite frightened that the situation is changing, and not just in America, but in Britain too, with that latest Supreme Court ruling, which leaves many in that community feeling quite frightened of abuse and attacks from people around them. How can we reach out to those who feel marginalized and rejected? How do we show Jesus' God's boundless love and mercy? I want to take you back to Veronica's story. You remember that this Baptist minister was getting phone calls of sightings of his other cats. But then one day there was a phone call from about a mile away from where he lived, but it didn't quite fit the pattern. It was Sunday afternoon, and Veronica had been missing for 10 days. And so he went to that location and walked the streets calling the cat's name, and then put up some extra posters in that area because he hadn't put posters there. But there was no sight of Veronica. And then a few days later, there was another phone call from not far from where the previous call had came from, saying that a Siamese cat had been seen and was playing with her cats. So he went to that road and walked around the area calling her name, and there was no sign of her. He asked about where the cat had been seen, and actually the woman had taken a picture on her phone, and she showed it to him, and it was quite blurry, but he thought it probably was Veronica. So for the next few nights around sunset, because that's the time cats like to go out and try and catch birds and things, he walked around the area calling her name. And still, there was no sign. A couple of days later, he was busy at work with some meetings when he got a phone call from another woman who said that she'd been out walking her dog. She'd seen the poster of Veronica, and she was quite sure that she could see the cat from her flats. And it was in the same kind of area. So she sent him a picture of this cat enjoying the sunshine in somebody's front garden, and he was quite sure it was Veronica. So he phoned his boss and said, I'm leaving work because I'm going to find this cat. She said that the woman who called said that she would try and tempt her with treats, but the minister knew it would take about an hour to get there because he was in town. Well, he got there in just under an hour. No speed limits were broken. And it was really close to where this cat had been seen a couple of days before, but there was no sign of her. And then the woman whose garden it was came out and said that she'd seen the cat too, and it had even been in her house one day. And she had her own cat, so she left out some cat food in the front garden. And she said if she saw it again, she would try and catch it. The minister walked again around the streets, calling the cat's name, but no sign. As he returned to his car, he looked carefully into each of the front gardens of the houses he walked past. And just as he got to the garden of the house where she'd been seen, he looked and he saw Veronica sat by this bowl of cat food. She looked very thin and very nervous, and when she saw him, she jumped off and ran close to the wall of the house. The minister went up to the gates of the drive, but they were padlocked shut, so he couldn't get in. He continued to call Veronica's name, and she very slowly walked towards the gates and then squeezed through the bars, and he grabbed her. He took her in his arms and held her tight. He took her home, got her checked over at the vet's, fed her, and made such a fuss of her. He celebrated and rejoiced, for the one who'd been lost was found. There she is, and I'm sure you've guessed it's my cat, Veronica. But through that period, it was quite a strange period, because if the cat had been run over by a car, you'd have thought, oh, that's really, really sad, and you'd been upset. But you know where they are. But if you lose a pet, or heartbreakingly a child, and don't know where they are, you panic because you think, well, what's happened to them? Where on earth could they possibly be? And I think it helped me to understand a little bit of some of that heartbrokenness of God for those who are lost, for those who they don't know where they are. But who is lost? Who are the lost? Well, when I was growing up in church, it was all very simple, wasn't it? The lost were all those people who were not Christians. I wonder if that's really true. I think it's a little bit over simplistic. You see, Jesus said that he had come to seek and save the lost, and that he'd come that people might have life and have it to the full. In part of my role at the moment, I work quite closely with leaders from other faith traditions, Sikhs and Muslims and Jews as well. And it's very clear that they have a very pious and deep faith in God. Are they lost? Or are they reaching God in a different way to us? Well, I mean, I would still say that to be certain, the best thing to do is to come to know Jesus, because we know that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can find the way to the Father except through him. But who else is lost? Sometimes there are people within our churches who are lost. It's quite possible to come to church every Sunday for years and years and years and still not truly have found the Father's love and found his embrace and found what it is to live life in all its fullness. How do we reach the lost? Well, again, when I was younger, it was really very simple. And I remember, I better not name them, but a couple who came to the church where I was in the youth group. I must have been 13 maybe or 14. And they did evangelism training on how we reach people for Jesus. And there was a simple process that you went through. You basically told people that they were lost, that they were going to hell, and the way to resist that was to come to Jesus. And then we did the training, and then we were sent out to go and do this. And so, as a dutiful young Christian, I went on these climbing frames when there were some other kids playing and told them that they were going to hell. I don't think they really listened to me very much and they certainly didn't turn to Jesus. But there were others I said the same thing to, and they decided that they would pray the prayer, but did they say that to get me off their back? I don't know. What does Jesus do? Well, we don't ever really see Jesus telling people about hell, other than his closest followers. It's not his evangelistic approach. He goes out and he loves people. He sits and has meals with sinners. He heals those who are sick, for those who are hurting. He reaches out to those who are on the fringes of society, like the woman at the well, or the lepers that he healed. And we see many instances of that, don't we, in the Gospels, of where he reaches out to those on the margins. What got Jesus killed? Well, theologically, we understand that Jesus died so that we could have that fullness of life. But what was the human reason that Jesus got killed? It wasn't really matters of great theology, and the religious leaders were very cross about the claims that he was making about himself, and eventually some of those were used for trumped up charges. But this is what really riled them, what we hear at the beginning of these parables. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. The very people who needed to hear Jesus' message of hope. The very people who needed to discover life, and life in all its fullness. And perhaps many of them, given the parties and the meals that Jesus had with them, they perhaps thought that they were living life to the full. But as Jesus reached out to them, he was able to show them what it meant to come into the family of God, to know God as their Father, and to know the compassion and the embrace of God's mercy. And God still calls us to do that today.